Turn Is It Anyway, a podcast all about our board gaming group and board games. I'm Adrian, your first player, and I'm joined today by Lord and Lady Kerley.
Hi there.
Hey everyone.
Today we'll be talking about upgrading your board games and board game Bling. You join us mid-first turn where Kerley has already won, but we shall move on to our second turn anyway. Before we get going though, how's everyone doing?
Yeah, really good, thanks.
Yeah, great, thank you. Very
Tired,
good.
but yeah, going well.
Yeah, we have released an Expo episode, but we are just post-Expo at this point as well, so...
Yeah, and a busy week as well.
Yeah.
It's never helps.
Feeling the burn. But I've got annual leave next week, so
Yay.
I am pleased about that.
Woohoo! Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Right, okay, without any further ado, let's move on to the second turn. So here we go with our second turn, where we talk about you and me, and we talk about all the good things and the bad things that have been as we talk about Hex. So, we are lucky enough today not to be joined by JP. We've managed to pry him away from the podcast episode, our first entirely JP-free podcast episode.
Shalom. I've gate crashed.
What are you doing here?
I thought you're doing a podcast episode and you tried to do it without me, and I found you.
I mean, I know it is in your house, but...
Yeah, it is in my house, so you didn't try very hard, as number one. Do it somewhere else and steal the equipment, and then I won't turn up. Now, I'm only here for 2 minutes. I'm going to talk about...
You're on the clock.
Oh, on the clock, am I?
2 minutes.
Jesus Christ. 2 minutes, because I recently played Septima, which is a Mindclash Games. I always talk about Mindclash Games because I love them. And I played it at Gaming Rules HQ. And by the time this episode comes out, Septima will be on Kickstarter, probably towards the tail end of its campaign. And I just thought it's a really relevant thing to kind of bring and show you or share my experiences of what it's like. So that's why I'm here.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Septima is it's on the lighter end of Mindclash Games. It's still quite heavy because it's Mindclash, but it's definitely lighter than their other titles. So Septima is all about you manage your covens of witches, right? So it's kind of set in that medieval witchy like European town, and it's all based in this town called Noctemburg. And
That's cool.
yeah, it's very cool. The artwork's done by the same artist. I can't remember the name, but it's done by the same artist who's done Tricarion.
Okay.
So for those that kind of like the art and that, it's the same kind of deal. Essentially, you've got a hex map of the town, and the surrounding edges is like a forest, and there's all different resources you can pick up in the forest. And then right at the edge of the maps, you've got these witch hunters. And the kind of idea of the game is that you kind of have to, you don't have to work with other covens, but if you do, you get bonuses for doing it, but also raises suspicion because you're using your magic, and therefore the witch hunters get suspicious, and they come in and potentially capture your witches. So you don't actually play as a particular witch, you have a variety of witches that you can attract into your coven, and they all have different special abilities and things like that. So if your witches get captured, they end up getting put onto trial, and there's a whole kind of bag management clank-esque kind of drawing kind of meeples from the bag. Some are angry because they're like, witches, we don't want them in our towns, we want to get rid of them. And then you can put some of your own kind of coloured meeples in there to help swing the favour of the vote. And that's quite an interesting mechanic because there's always a trial at the end of every season, and you can actually then attract other witches that aren't anybody's into your coven, but also if you have one of yours captured, other players can then rescue them or get them off the hook and then attract them into theirs. So quite an interesting interplay there. But essentially how the game plays, you've got a hand of cards, and each of these cards do different things like move, kind of pick up ingredients, brew potions, all witchy stuff that you kind of expect.
Sounded good.
And the cool mechanic that I really enjoyed with it is you kind of have this discussion, which I've not seen in the game before, with other players, which is, what are you going to do? What are you going to play? And it's quite an important thing. And in a competitive game, you think you wouldn't really do it, right? You wouldn't kind of try and say, well, I'm going to do this. And the reason why that's kind of in there is that if you ever match with another player, you get a bonus. You can actually do all the actions on that card. So it benefits you, it benefits them. The downside is then the suspicion raises because you're kind of similar to doing things, and you've kind of balanced your suspicion track versus where you are on the map, because the witch hunters can kind of come in and get you. And also the benefits of matching your actions is that you can go up this other track. It's called the right track, and it's essentially, you can imagine like loads of dots in triangles, and you can zigzag your way up to the top of the track. And if you match the symbols to where you're on that track, you can kind of get up to the top, get victory points, all those kind of things. And you can unlock charms and actions and abilities and kind of build your little engine on things. But I really enjoyed it. Like, I could probably talk about it for a long, long time. I'm not going to. But I really enjoyed it. I just wanted to kind of share my brief experience on the prototype that I played. And yeah, Mindclash Games.
Why is it called Septima? Is that any?
It's the name of the main witch who's kind of retiring and handing over. Basically, she's retiring from being a witch or witchy things, and then saying you're the coven that's going to take over.
So it's entirely competitive,
Yes.
but with a little bit of cooperation in there to help you get to the top, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've mentioned, obviously, bag building.
Yeah.
What other sort of core mechanics are there in there? Like, is it worker placement? Is it auction bidding? Or is it...
No, it's hand management. So essentially,
Right, okay.
you'll have 5 turns within a season. There's 4 seasons, so 20 actions per the whole game, and you'll have your deck that you run through, and every card you play in a season, you don't get to play that card. You get to play basically the rest of your cards, but there's one of the cards that's called Remember, and then that allows you to basically copy an action in your discard pile.
Right,
So at the end
okay.
of the season, you get all those cards back. So again, you can kind of then work out what others have played, knowing which actions are safe, and sometimes you might do a bit of bluffing to say, yeah, I'm going to play movement. Yeah, I really need to play movement because you really need to play something else that doesn't raise suspicion, so
Right,
you can
okay.
get what you get what you want from. So yes, it's quite interesting tug of war element, which I've not kind of experienced in a
I was
competitive
going to say,
game.
it sounds like a lot of elements I've not seen put
No,
together before,
it's-
so...
It's definitely unique, but yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Well, you've sold me. Sounds really good.
Yeah, I saw some pictures that you posted up before,
Yeah.
and it looked visually appealing,
Yeah.
and some of that stuff does sound like it would...
It's very purple.
Yeah.
So if you like purple, yeah.
Well, there you go. You sold it to me as well.
I like Mindclash Games anyway, so that's
Yeah.
always a bonus.
And it is on the lighter side, which means
'Cause
it's
they're
about
an-
medium heavy.
Are they anachrony, right?
Yeah.
Mindclash.
Anachrony, Carry On,
I think we've got to
Perseverance.
carry on coming up, haven't we?
Yeah. Excited for that, to be honest, but there we go. But that's me. So I'll leave you to
Brilliant.
it now. I'm going
Thanks.
to go and make a cup of tea and I'm going to bugger off. So
Yeah, that's it. You
Yeah.
enjoy. We'll just
Mine's
sit...
a, mine's a coffee, one sugar. Thank you.
whatever. I can't interrupt the recording. Bye. See you later, guys.
Bye.
Have fun.
Right, now he's out of the room. Kerley, tell us about what you've been up to recently.
Well, board gaming wise, I've played a lot of games, but a lot of ones that we've spoken about before. I played Art Nova, or I've played.
I had a terrible time in that game.
it
It just didn't work for me.
No, I know.
It just didn't work for me.
One of those days.
Yeah.
But I also taught Becky Lords of Waterdeep.
Good game.
Yeah,
Really enjoyed
fantastic game. Yeah, one of my favourites. It's one of those that's kind of it's light enough to be relatively quick and casual, but there's enough different strategies, enough different things you can do to make it interesting. You know, it's hit that sweet spot for me, and I know it's been a popular game, top 100 on BGG for
been around for a long time,
absolutely
yeah.
years. You know, and there's a reason why it's still there. It's just such a good game. For those of you who don't know it, it's I'd say thematically it's probably one of the weaker games that you'll come across. It could have been literally any thematic,
It could.
but it is based in the fantasy realm in a city called Waterdeep, and basically you have to get a load of soldiers and wizards and priests together, rogues, in order to complete missions. And it's lightweight Euro worker placement style game. With completion of missions to get VPs. It's fairly simple in the way that it plays, but you know, endless options, and you know,
There's just a ton of routes in it, isn't there? There's
Yeah.
You can build buildings which give you a bonus when other people go there, and it can sway the game towards. If a lot of buildings of one type come out, for instance, it can sway the game slightly towards a different way of working.
yeah.
And I think that's the reason why it's got a lot of staying power, like in the board game sort of circle, is the fact that for such a simple game, certainly for simple for when it came out, it offered so much variety and so many different ways of playing it. Yeah, I totally understand why it's still in the...
For someone who really hates the learning part of the game, which is me, I just cannot stand that bit. I really, really loved it, and bearing in mind I was learning it at about 10 o'clock at night at the expo, was really, really tired, and I still really, really loved it. And we've got the modded pieces, which, you know, goes into what we're going to be speaking about later, so that's cool. But it's really, really simple to grasp, but I can see how much more interesting it plays when you realise, oh, this is about this, and you can modify your approach, I guess.
Yeah.
Really liked it. Very simple. Anyone could play.
Yeah, I agree.
Really
I've literally
liked it.
got one bugbear, which kind of is the reason why I sold it on, apart from the fact that everyone I knew had a copy, which is the compulsory missions. I think they're a bit too severe.
Yeah.
I've been 34, so I played a lot of it when I was first started. I've been like 30, 40 points ahead, and just 4 people have just chucked, in 2 turns, have just chucked compulsory missions at me, and you're like, well,
What am I going to do now?
that's it, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, it's just too severe. Like, I get it's good to handicap and a player who is running away a little bit, but I wish there was, like, you know, if this is still in your hand at the end of turn, it's worth -8 victory points or something, rather than the other way around.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
that's my only complaint of that game. Otherwise, I think it's still really stand up solid. It's why it fell off my sort of
Yeah, that's fair enough.
my top 50, if you like, of games.
that's it.
So,
Yeah, fair enough.
Bill, Becky,
Yeah, so we played a game of... Now, I'm going to pronounce it both ways so that people can search it and find it. So the correct pronunciation, apparently, is Troyes, but it's written Troyes. Troyes.
that's the way I read it.
Yeah, Troyes. You would assume that was how it was, right? But no, apparently not. Apparently the actual town is called Troyes. So there we go. Which is basically a dice drafting kind of... is it dice drafting? You roll dice and you have to pick them from your little pool, but you can also steal other people's for a certain cost.
Right.
So you've got certain things you can do on the board. You can either focus on building the cathedral, you can fight battles, or you can kind of be I suppose it's craftsman, isn't it? So you're kind of getting other bonuses for things. Every time you've got to, every sort of turn, round, you've got to defend the town against some kind of marauder of some kind. So there's always got to be some element of attacking an outside thing. You're not really attacking each other, you're all kind of working together to attack the outside thing, but that's done on turn order, which changes each time.
Right.
So if you're unfortunate enough to be first player that time and you've got something really hefty out, you have to spend your dice, defending the first time. There is a penalty for stealing other people's dice, which means you have to actually pay them for it.
Yeah.
But I kept rolling amazingly, and everyone was stealing my dice. But actually, that worked out for me in the end because I actually had quite a lot of money. So you've got certain ways of getting VPs. You kind of have influence, which means you can change dice numbers, which is actually, some you can re-roll, some you can literally turn the dice over to get the other number so you know exactly what it's going to be. And you can basically spend your influence points doing that. But there's also ways of getting VP actually on the cards of the kind of craftsman people that you're going around.
Right.
And you've also got like a hidden agenda. Now that is a hidden agenda for you, but also it works for everyone else. So if your hidden agenda is you get VP for having lots of money,
right,
everybody else will get VP
We'll
for having money
it.
too.
It's just
So
you know that it's there and they don't.
Exactly.
So you can... it sounds interesting.
Yeah, sometimes it's very blatantly obvious what that person's going for. Sometimes it isn't so much. And obviously you've got a much bigger advantage if you know what the other choices could be.
Yeah.
So if you're playing fresh off the, fresh to the table, you've never seen it before, you're going to have a slight disadvantage. However, it's still really, really easy to learn. But again, similar to that way of easy to learn, but there's enough in it that makes it complex.
Yeah.
So,
It's kind of like an interesting mix between a dice drafting game, a worker placement game, and kind of a cooperative fighting off the enemy game.
Yeah,
it works really well. It's a difficult one to describe though, I have to say. But
I've looked at it because it's come up a couple of times in our group, and unfortunately I've just not been able to make those evenings because it did look good. It didn't look anything like you've described it, so I'm interested now to give it a go because I would have had a very different, just looking at the board, sometimes you have a bit of a perception as to what that game's going to do.
interesting
the
artwork.
art style, the art style is very
Interesting.
strange.
Yeah.
Very strange. It's a particular artist who's done a few. JP would have been able to fill out the gap of what other games they've done. Why is he here, JP? He's abandoned us. But no, it's a very interesting art style in it, and the game, for me, the art style doesn't do the game any favours.
Oh, I love it. The pictures are irrelevant.
Yeah,
really.
simplified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just kind of looks very medieval. That's probably a good way of describing it. And I got it for, was it 15 quid or 20 quid from the Expo Bring a Buy sale?
Bargain.
So, bargain.
Why not, eh? I'm going to quickly talk about a game we talked about just on the last podcast, I think, which is Game of Thrones. I managed to get another game in, having said it's probably a once-a-year game. Another gaming group that I play with occasionally decided to get a game in of it while you guys were off at the expo. And yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Didn't play with the Targaryens. We played with the Iron Bank and the vassal system, but decided to leave the Targaryens to one side because the guys hadn't played it in a long time, so I don't play it often. So it was nice to keep things simple. It was good, really enjoyable. Starks and Tyrells fought out good combat for most of it, even though they're at opposite ends of the map. But we had Greyjoys and Lannisters as vassals, so they kind of used the vassals backwards and forwards to hit each other and tried to do a thing that we played in the last game where you try and almost sacrifice the side where you want to take all their castles, try and make their force weak so you can take them over. But the bit I wanted to talk about was it is probably one of the meanest games I've ever played or ever seen played. So I was the Martells, another player was Aaron, and in between was Baratheons. The Aaron player was not going to go after the Greyjoy section because that's what the Starks were owning and they were in league with the Starks. So they were pushing down towards Baratheons. Tyrells had a nice setup to start with, so I decided to go after the Baratheons. And I think I took Dragonstone turn 4 and had them down to 3 territories, the Baratheons, because I had to go after one of them as that very southern faction. You kind of go sort of east or west as you're going north. And yeah, turn 4, a player was pretty much out of the game, and apologies to that player. They know who they are if they're listening. It was definitely not a good play experience for them. I felt mean for about 48 hours afterwards. But still enjoyed the game. Just reminded me of exactly why it's got this reputation of being such a cutthroat game.
Once they get, so you were saying that your kind of friend was almost out by like turn 2 or 3 or whatever. Can you claw any of it back, or do you just have to basically throw the towel in?
He was able to. He had a bad few things happen one after the other. He was good at holding on to his territory, and he also made sure that he won quite a few of the tracks.
I've got an interesting question for you then, because I'm not sure where I'd fall on this one. Do you think you'd have played that where you should have attacked the other people who didn't have a natural enemy instead? So what I'm really saying is it more important for you to win and someone else have a negative experience that you know of, or would you rather potentially win but have a lesser chance to win to make sure that someone isn't getting pincered as you described?
It was a question that I've asked myself for quite a bit afterwards, because I was thinking they did have a terrible play experience, and it is almost entirely my fault. You can't place the blame anywhere else. He did all he could. He was my primary target. He's the one I chose first turn. We had a little bit of a jokey argument about a territory. So that's mine. He said, no, that's mine. So he went for it because he got first turn. I went, right, that's the start of the battle then, right? So I'll go after him. It wasn't until a couple of turns later that I realised how much I'd pushed him. And I could have sort of come off the pedal a little bit, but all I'd have done is given the other player the ability, because I weakened him enough. It was either me or it was the Aaron player on the other side of him that would have then come down and taken it.
So almost once you've made that decision, that's it.
It was, by the time I'd realised my mistake in game, I thought, well, this is the damage is now done. So
I may as well make the most of it and absolutely.
Well, this is it. It was like, well, at this point, I might as well keep going in that direction. So, but anyway, that's our games. So we played over the last couple of weeks. Now we move on to turn 3, our main turn, and one I know that Becky is particularly excited for.
Yep, this is my time to be
shine.
Fully excited, to literally shine and sparkle.
So we are going to talk about board game Bling, upgrading your board game, all the things you can add to the base game, essentially the game you buy, to make it a better game one way. And we're going to break this down into 3 sort of main topics to go through. So we'll talk firstly about aesthetics. So anything you can add or change to the game that make it look prettier, look a bit more blingy, give it more table presence, whatever it is there. We're then going to look at functional upgrades you can make to a board game. There's a few examples. I think it's quite tough to talk about it in generalities, but we'll talk about sort of functional improvements. And then we're going to talk about storage and improvement of storage of your games. So shall we kick on with aesthetics?
Yeah.
Go on then, Becky.
So this area is my area of favourite things to do to a board game. I think maybe it's because I grew up as an almost only child. Although I do have siblings, I grew up on my own, so I had to I wanted to customise everything. So everything I owned would have my name on it, or I don't know, a sticker or something. So I think being able to sort of personalise your game with, I don't know, the kind of things that you like. So often we get in board games little cardboard tokens.
Yeah.
Now that is fine if you want to be basic and play the game in a really boring way, then you crack on. But when you can go out there and obtain nice wooden pieces or shiny pieces or make your own or whatever, I don't think it matters if you've made them or if you've bought them, because you don't have to spend lots of money. It could just be, you know, little squares you found, it could be anything. It could be little mahjong tiles, could be whatever you like. But that kind of improving your gameplay and making it different has always been one of my favourite things to do with anything that I own, really.
So what do you think makes a good aesthetic upgrade then? What do you think
I like it when you've
you
got the tie-in with the iconography on the cards, for example. So Wingspan is a perfect example for this. So yeah, you've got those little wooden tokens, which are very, you know, Wingspan is one of the prettiest games, just as its basic game. So you can buy, or we have already bought, that there is, you know, in existence, the wooden versions, which I think are more hardy. So you're going to get longer out of them.
Yes, there is some functional improvement in there, isn't there?
So we can pretend that it's because of the functionality that we wanted them. I think there are some games, actually, you know, Wingspan's probably not a very good example of this. So something like Quacks of Quedlinburg, for example. Yeah. So those cardboard tokens are fine, but you've got a sweaty hand delving into a bag, pulling out little cardboard tokens. You're feeling them and you're kind of ruffling them around. You're going to... those tokens are going to look unrecognisable after maybe...
We talked about it in the last episode.
Maybe 4 turns or something. So I think aesthetics and functionality would come out, you know, useful for Quacks. But I think the best thing is something that is shiny or more 3D or more obviously different to all the other cardboard pieces. Yeah. That's what I think an aesthetic improvement is all about. Making it more visually obvious, perhaps, or tactile, especially. I think that's what really sells it to me.
Well, it's I'd like to do a little bit of a shout out, actually, speaking of not spending money, for a company called the Game Night UK, who do a lot of their work on Etsy. Yeah. And we bought a whole load of I'm going to just sum them up with the term meeple for many of our games, but they did also include it, for example, for anyone who knows Wingspan, Nectar tokens and things like that. Yeah. But we got a full set of Lords of Waterdeep meeples and some stuff for Art Nova as well. Yeah. Just a shout out to them, really, and that was one example of
just beautiful. Just beautiful. JP sent us a link and I was like, ooh, look at the shiny little tokens.
Yeah, Etsy's a dangerous place now, I've found, because
absolutely,
as you say, sort of not spending a lot of money. A lot of these places put out some really nice upgrades for not a lot of money comparatively. You know, sometimes you can talk about Quacks. If you go and buy the Geek Up bits, they are beautiful, but you're spending sometimes double the price of the base game,
absolutely,
just to get those extra bits. Whereas I found Etsy's quite often the quality may not be as there as if it's an official product. Yeah. Sometimes it is, but it may not always be. But they're still always normally a nice upgrade on your game for very little money comparatively.
It's more of a functionality thing, but I would like to say with Quacks of Quedlinburg, it's just coin holders is the way to go with those ones. So it's
very kind of expensive though.
Well, it is expensive, but it's not going to be as expensive as if you bought them from, you know, the company themselves, or you know, you paid out for wooden versions.
Yeah,
or
there are
like
often
that.
cheaper ways to get around that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but I think with aesthetics, it's about making it look how you think it should have looked originally. You know, I guess if you've got a Kickstarter version, perhaps, and you see the regular version, like Terraforming Mars that you've got the big box of. So does it matter that your squares are dense and beautiful and shiny? No, probably not. You would get the little wooden squares, right, or plastic ones in the base game.
I think you can kind of just sum it up really easily with Terraforming Mars. Actually, the component quality in the original base game of Terraforming Mars is famously awful. It's totally rubbish. Like, literally, the card centering's not great. You know, the print offs they've done, the print runs they did of the sheets were no good as well. The component quality is just so poor. Like the little metal cubes, well, they're not metal, they're painted metal, just chip off really easily.
Yeah, the chromey kind of.
Yeah, they're awful. But they've got to put it out at a certain price point, right?
Yeah,
And
that's a
it's,
really important
you know,
point. If it means that it's accessible and people can buy the game, then great, buy the basic version.
And the thing is once you know that you love a game, you don't mind spending the money
This
on
was
it.
exactly what I was thinking, was that the base game, if you can get in and it's like, here's 30 quid, loads of people will play it, and then they can choose, can't they, whether they care about the aesthetics, the functionality, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They can choose to do that. Whereas if you slap it in at 70, 80 quid because you've already made that choice, that's fine. Like, you look at Vitel Lacerda, Eagle Griffin games, they're beautiful, all the storage is good, the aesthetics is lovely. It's £100 a game.
Yeah.
How many people are buying that?
Not just off the bat, if you don't know, you're like,
it's
if
just
played
a risk, isn't it? You
absolutely.
don't mind risking £30 on a game that you're not sure about, but you wouldn't spend 100 on one, until you knew how it played and everything else. So the point is, anyway, is you buy Terraforming Mars, which was, I don't know, £45 probably originally, £50 maybe. I can't really remember what the base game was.
I think it's going to be now around the £50 mark. I think it was close to 40 when it first came out.
Yeah, maybe. But and then 2 years later, I've bought the big box, which was near enough £300. Because I knew I'd loved it. Yeah. My friends love it, and we've played it so many times that it's worth it.
Yeah. Per play, that game has probably worked out the cheapest, I would say.
Yeah, probably.
And especially when you look at hours per play.
Yeah.
Probably looking at Tuppence halfpenny an hour now because we played it so often.
Tuppence halfpenny.
For our international listeners, that's very little money.
Yeah, 0.15 cent or something. Yeah, not a lot of money.
I was going to say, I think to your point, Curly, is that there's 3 levels there. You can buy base Terraforming Mars, looks a bit rubbish, but is still functionally the game you're playing. Plenty of people either 3D printed or bought from Etsy stores their own plastic upgrades for the board, their own plastic
city tiles
or dual player boards, which I'm sure we'll get to at functionality point of view as well. And then the other option, which is the £100, I think, for retail, if you didn't quite get everything, or £300 through Kickstarter, as you say, is the official one. It is the nicest I think I've seen. It's the most official looking. Everything ties in. It's a little bit better quality. And they're your kind of 3 levels, aren't they? You can go official, you can go... My example is Brass Birmingham. So I bought retail edition brass. It comes with cardboard coins. The options I had when I looked at was maybe to go and buy some metal coins or something like that on an Etsy or a third party. What I ended up doing was buying Roxley's Iron Clays, which has mixed reviews, but I absolutely love them. They're little poker chips. They look the part. And I use them for loads of other games as well. It's not just Brass Birmingham, but they just look the part. They feel nice. We're talking about sort of that
tactility
sort of clicky clacky sort of part to it, and it just improves your experience of the game, right? You just feel more immersed. You feel more like you're having an event.
Yeah,
when you've got those kind of extras.
That's what the aesthetic improvement does for me, and it doesn't hurt that I like fabricating things. So for a game of, how do you pronounce it? Is it Gugong? Gugong. So the kind of, it's a Chinese kind of ambassadorial game. That sounds really boring, but it's really, really good.
It's on my must play list.
It's amazing, and you've got pieces of jade. Now, surely to goodness, it doesn't cost a lot to make a bit of plastic green thing.
In the Kickstarter, it was.
Well, the cardboard bits you get are just, quite frankly, offensive to someone who cares. I mean, the rest of the game is so beautiful.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have cost them more, 50p more, 20p more to actually have. Plastic tiddlywinks would be better than the cardboard bits you've got. So, all right, I already own, epoxy resin and UV resin and hardening resin. So I wanted to make some green shiny ones, and they look great. And that probably cost absolutely nothing.
Cost you nothing because you already got all the resins.
I suppose. But I could sell that for like maybe £5.
Yeah.
And it would cost me 20p to make. Oh, and my time. So I suppose, but it's not that long. But it looks so much nicer. It does, yeah. So much nicer. You could even just get little bits of green stone, for goodness sake.
Just
why do they do cardboard?
Sea glass or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Why they would... When your game is so beautiful, I just think sometimes developers really do cheap out when it wouldn't actually cost that much more. Maybe it's not just that. Maybe it's the sourcing. Maybe it's the weight. I don't know. I don't think it would have been that much.
I think there is a whole load of, you've got weight and all that kind of stuff in there, I think.
I think we have made the transition really nicely into functionality.
I think so as well,
So
yep.
I think with functionality upgrades, it's the kind of game that we wished they had made. That's kind of the biggest difference for me, I think. So things like better tokens, or aesthetics is involved in that, but if you've got lots of tokens that are all quite similar, and you have made something that is, or made, I always say made because that's what I would do. If you have purchased or whatever, something that makes that immediately different, that's really helpful, I think. And not just the actual tokens, when you've got things like storage kind of boxes or something that you can take out rather than have to shuffle through cards every time.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got like a little player tray, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
I can't think of a game that would be useful for, where you, like the like something for, you know, you've got those Twilight Imperium little shelves.
Oh yeah, I was going to talk
shelves?
about those. So it's essentially you put your ships on them. They're on stilts with platforms.
That's
I've
it.
seen
You
them.
put
Yeah.
your ships on them and you move them all together. So why not have them all on a little movable thing that you can? It doesn't disturb any of the stuff underneath.
It looks
know.
really nice as well.
It
But
is.
as you say, it's that picking, like scooping all your ships
Yeah.
up with the hand almost,
Yeah.
as opposed to just pushing a little tray across, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And as well, the only problem that I had with it is I had my heart set on the different coloured ones.
Yeah.
So each faction had
Yeah.
2 of these that they could have, and there's I think now 6 different colours that you can have. But I had to order it from the States. Yeah, well, I had to order it from the States because there was all of the ones available in the UK were all just clear. And that's I didn't really want that. So yeah, that would be my only complaint. Is that to actually order Etsy.
Sure, I could have
from-
done something like with something
I'm
with
sure
that
you
for
could
you.
do. You usually can. But yeah, Etsy from the States. But that's an example I was going to bring up actually. So yeah, that's one of the I don't know functional upgrade that I never really thought about. That actually made quite a big difference to how I
Yeah.
not how I
it's-
play the game, but how easy it
Yeah,
is.
I think with functionality upgrades, that often happens after the fact. I don't know that maybe a game board designer would have necessarily thought about that. That is something that people have thought to themselves, oh, do you know what? This really needs to have something that moves a whole chunk together, or it's something that has happened sort of organically after you've played a few times and thought, oh, I really need this kind of, this thing, this certain mechanic or certain approach would be really helpful here. And then people design it either on Etsy or, you know, third party or whatever. That's more often, it seems to me, the way it goes, rather than, right, this is a game coming straight out of the box, we've got this amazing thing. Because you need to have play tested it extensively, I think, in order to get the idea in the first place.
Yeah, I think I might disagree with you on that one. Like, it's what we're here for, a bit of conversation. Is I think a lot of people know the functional upgrades they require. I think they look at cost. I think more than aesthetics point of increasing the cost. Do you think those trays for moving Twilight Imperium around would have added 10, 15, 20 pound onto the cost by the time I'm guessing they've put them in a tray and all that kind of stuff? And you know,
It seems really weird. I don't want to do it, but I actually agree with Adrian over my wife. I'm not sure this is good for my marriage.
That's crack on.
But no, I absolutely agree. I think I gain benefit from it to the tune of how much I paid, which was, well, way too much, I have to say, once you've ordered it in from the States. But yeah, I think it's probably not worth it for most people. And that's the point, is that if you're looking at something and it's costing £150 instead of £120, and you're like, well, you were on the fence anyway, those little things, it's not going to make £30 worth of difference, you know? It's a fine balancing act for the people designing it, I think.
And I think if you look at Kickstarters, quite often the functional upgrades are the add-ons.
Yeah, but
Because
I think they probably didn't come up with that initially, you know? I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just my experience of it. When you're starting to play a game, everything is cardboard, everything is whatever, and you think, oh, actually, that'd look really nice if that was, I don't know, plastic or 3D or whatever, and it would be useful for it to be like that because of accessibility issues or just easier gameplay. But I think you're right, it does tend to come with Kickstarters, but then I don't know.
I think the reason why they're add-ons on Kickstarters is making even add-ons in like deluxe boxes, the functional upgrades, because it's easy to sell. Look, this looks prettier.
Yeah.
That's immediately obvious to you.
Yeah.
If I turn around to you and said, 12 games in, you're going to realise you want this thing in your game, you might sort of go, oh, that's a bit of a tougher sell. And so I think that's why they don't include them in the base game, is because it's harder to say, look at this, look at this card tower that holds all your cards. We've added it in for you. I think people would go, oh, if someone
really need it. Yeah, maybe.
Do I care about if I say to you, look at these 12 gorgeous models that cost the same price or similar price? I think it's an easier sell for people. So I think that's from my point of view, I think that's where the functionality is where we tend to add them ourselves rather than
wait
the
to have.
games designers do, the publishers do.
I think it's an interesting, going back to our Kickstarter episode, which I won't reference too much, but it's a really interesting tie over there, is because I actually mentioned in that episode that I hate expansion add-ons.
Yeah.
Because I think, well, if you've made it, flip and include it in part of the game. I hate you buy a game and then you got the choice of 6 extra expansions that all cost half the price of the original game each. Oh, it frustrates me so much. But the flip side to that is the add-ons are a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Because if, for example, Adrian, you wanted the coin upgrade, you could do that. Well, I don't want a coin upgrade. I've got coins.
Yeah.
But you can buy it, and I don't have to.
Yeah.
And same with I can see the functionality use of that one. I don't mind paying £15, but someone else would go, no, I don't need that.
So one of the things that I wanted to bring up with functionality is, for me, a lot of the things that add functionality are usable in multiple games. Coins,
like your coins, yeah.
The iron clays. We're sat at one of the very nice, is it Geek and Sun tables recording this?
Geek and Sun tables.
There's plenty of them out there. They come with that little line on the inside that you can stick your cards. Put your cards in.
Yeah.
That's great, but I'm never going to afford any of these. So I printed out a load of little card holders.
Little trays, yeah.
Just trays you can stick your cards in when you're playing something like Marvel Champions or Lord of the Rings or whatever, where you've got a little hand of cards. It's great. It sounds really lazy, right? But you can just put your cards in there. You can keep an eye on them. You're not holding on to them. You can do whatever else you want to do, drink and move tokens around.
Yeah.
And the other one I thought of was, and this will come into storage a little bit because you kind of can defunct them with the right storage, but the little trays with the funnels on that you can put all your bits in and then you can funnel them back into your little Ziploc bag or whatever it is at the end, and we'll get to it in storage because you can defunct those. But all of those things can be moved from one game to another. And there are things, we've talked about them, that aren't just functional, but for one game. That are just functional for one game, but there's plenty of options out there. When I thought about this, I thought of all of those generic upgrades that are functional improvements on a lot of games.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's really important to spend your money wisely when it comes to these things. Like, we won't talk too much about the expo, but I bought a whole boatload of coins from there. I think it was, about 50 in the end. 40, and the way I justified...
44, I think.
No, it was 48 actually, but I didn't want to be specific. 48.
We're in a pedant-free zone, or not.
But the reason why I justified the cost, and they weren't massively cheap, was the fact that I can use them for anything. So I bought 1s, 5s and 10s in absolute boatload of 1s, a few 5s and a few 10s,
But it doesn't say 1, 5 or 10 on it either. It's bronze, silver and gold. So again, you're kind of making it more adaptable.
It could be 1s, 2s and 5s if you want it to.
Absolutely.
So I spent a bit of money on those, but the big one that I think that you guys haven't talked about yet is not only the ones that are multiple use, but also the really good solutions that are cheap. For an example, the big one, card protectors.
Yes,
right?
that's
huge
true.
Functional upgrade.
Yeah.
Can't believe I forgot about card sleeves.
I know. So that's the basics, right? I mean, I would suggest that to anyone. I mean, most people who's listening to this probably got card protectors and all their stuff, but it's just a great way of increasing the longevity and, you know what, the value. All right. So especially if you tend to sell second hand, people look at this stuff. Do you keep card protectors, things like that? And let's face it. Oh God, I'm trying to remember now, but you can get a bunch of kind of see-through card protectors for £1 or £2.
Yeah,
for about
it's
50.
not an expensive edition that could actually really be helpful.
Oh, you're going to start me ranting about card sleeves now. So,
we've opened a box. You
have opened the box. So I sleeve nearly all of my games. If the sleeves, my rule is if the sleeves cost less than the game, I will sleeve it.
Okay.
If the sleeves cost more than the game, I won't.
I thought you were going to say you still sleeve it.
No. If the sleeves cost more than the game and it's not like a Kickstarter exclusive, or includes that kind of thing, I won't bother. What I will say is there's plenty of sleeves out there that are called penny sleeves or whatever, and within 6 months those will have probably deteriorated if you're playing it at any level.
Yeah.
Spend a little bit more. My personal favourite is Mayday Premium because they're that nice middle ground between nice and cheap and good quality, and I know you can buy like dragon shields and king sleeves or something they're called. They're paladin sleeves and stuff like that. There's loads that they cost a little bit more and they are much better. They're all cut perfectly the same size every time and all that kind of stuff. But for me, Mayday Premium is my personal choice. Anyway, we'll finish functionality there, I think, and move on to storage. So come on, Becky, talk to us about phone call.
Storage. So One of my favourite things to do, and what was it? Was it Christmas you got me Mansions of Madness?
I got you Mansions of Madness with all the expansions bar one, I think, for Christmas, and then I had about a week of being able to play my games because I didn't see you.
Makes you sound like I'm there harassing him all the time.
That's true.
However, I was sat happy as Larry on the dining room table / the board game table with a big old cutting mat, a metal ruler, some kind of 5mm foam boards from Hobbycraft. Shout out to Hobbycraft, amazing shop. As I'm sure you could guess, that's one of my favourite places to go. They sell it in black or white. # black looks so much better. I really wish I'd have bought black for everything, but there we are. It was a little bit more expensive, and I was being a cheapskate at
what
the
did
time.
you do white on?
White was Wingspan, and Mansions of Madness I did do it in white. Yeah. So I spent a ridiculous amount of time sorting out the cards, and then also allowing for an expansion that I hadn't got that I then had to get from America because they didn't have it here. So I had to then do extensive research on how many of which particular kind of cards there were to make sure I left enough room in my grandmaster plan of organising between different kind of common items, spells, bloody whatever. So all of these fit in the board. So I had to measure them so they all sat nicely and fitted kind of in a graduating size, and I separated all the tiles out. And then I've also learnt from previous mistakes of if the board gets tipped over, the box gets tipped over, all the bits go everywhere. It's very annoying. So that is the one downside of foam core, because you can make lids, it's just a little bit more of a pain
process.
So I kind of made the best of both worlds, or couldn't be bothered to make boxes properly. So I kind of made everything that was going to be the same size in the same area, and then kind of incorporated into the lid different levels of, like, some parts have got, say, 4 layers of this foam core, which to
push it all down.
Exactly, yeah. I'm not saying you could turn it upside down and shake it and nothing would move. However, you could put it in the back of your car, you can carry it around, tip it around a bit, and the stuff's going to be in the same place.
Yeah.
And with that, you can then start making really lovely little labels for everything, which is definitely my jam.
I have to say your Mansions of Madness one doesn't really suffer from any problems with stuff being thrown around, but you do need to sort out Lords of Waterdeep.
See, this is the difference. See, this is very important to note to note here. If you haven't played the game before, you don't understand what the importance of each part is.
I agree.
So, doing it for Mansions of Madness was perfect because I understand what needs to come out in a box, what needs to come out in pieces, what needs to come out in chunks of 5, for example. How easy do I need to shuffle through this little stack of stuff? With Lords of Waterdeep, I hadn't played it, so I was saying to you, right, do these need to stay in a box? Do these need to stay in a thing? So that's fine, you can get that information, but I didn't understand the ramifications, perhaps, of how...
Yeah. It's just all about context, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. So know thy game before you attempt to...
And you can see this on, again, like, you can see this on Etsy. There's a few times I've been trying to, like, not rip off Etsy stores, but I've been trying to gain inspiration from what they've been doing.
I did exactly the same thing, Adrian. I'm not going to
have... With their 3D inserts, and I'll look at one and I think you've never played that game because you absolutely would not have put those together if you haven't.
Yeah.
You've got the pieces, or someone's lent you a copy of the game and you've gone, I'll create this.
I'll make this square.
But can see you've so I would say, absolutely. Before you create any of these things, get the game out, play it a couple of times, and then work out what the best combination is.
Or, go onto a website that you would trust. Like, there was an amazing one that we saw at the expo called Folded Space.
They're well known,
They were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. However, the price point is quite high. I would say, if you're going to spend the same amount as you've spent on the game,
it's entirely like
this is it. If you're going to play it a million times and it's going to save your organising by half, maybe it's worth it.
I just think it's purely and simply, it is a lot of money, but it's not worth that money. For example, your Mansions is free for me for you to but the amount of time you took to do it would have, if we'd have been paying you an hourly rate, it would have been about £1.10 or something, So I'm not saying that, like, they're brilliant quality, definitely worth the production price. But for me, I think I was looking at, and I got to tread carefully here because JP's got it, but the Twilight Imperium with the expansion insert that I was looking at was £52. And I don't think I could justify the cost.
Yeah.
And I get that. I've just spent £40-something on some coins for various games, but it's just about people's priorities.
This is it.
I agree.
This is it.
And for people like me, so I'm going to talk about 3D printing in a bit because that's my side of this argument, I suppose, of which one wins out, maybe. But I am never going to be able to cut those foam boards as nicely as Folded Space will have produced them for you automatically. Mine's going to look a mess if I have to cut out foam boards. And if people don't want to spend the money or can't afford a 3D printer or don't want it in the house or whatever it is, and their craft skills are terrible like mine are, then Folded Space or like E-Raptor or any of those ones that I think Feldir do some stuff as well. All of those kind of board game inserts that improve it. Yeah, they might be a bit expensive, but if you're going to play it a lot and it improves setup and teardown of a game.
This is it, yeah.
Then
what's
brilliant.
your time worth? What's your time worth and how nice it is
I think
to
the
have
game that springs to mind as being the one that I would actually consider, no matter the cost, is probably the new Frosthaven. Because Gloomhaven, oh my life, that setup was just horrendous. It was a very big barrier for me, and I love the game. But it was a huge barrier, the amount of time it takes to set up, because there's just bags everywhere, coins everywhere, everything everywhere. And Frosthaven is half again the size from what I can see on the Kickstarter.
Oh really?
Yeah, they've expanded it, and they've actually increased the price point, but guaranteed the ones we've already ordered.
When it comes to the foam ones, I think a couple of the benefits are that it stays relatively light.
Yeah.
Doesn't add a lot of weight. You can craft it yourself much easier. There's no outlay of 3D printers. It's you and a hobby knife and a bit of glue sort of thing.
And I would say if you've made one, it then gets progressively easier to make more, because you understand I won't say the mechanics, there's no mechanics involved, it's cardboard, but the way things
the design
work
process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you've already made one, you can then measure, cut. You could make multiples of the same one in a fraction of the time that it took you to make the first one.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that counts for 3D CADing as well.
100%.
I've tried many different ways and learned which ones I prefer and which ones I don't, for adding lids to boxes and stuff like that. And this is where I'm going to sort of talk about the 3D printing stuff. Is one of the things I love about the 3D printed storage is that I can take a box out, take the lid off, and put it on the table.
Yeah.
It's got the nice curved edges, so when you put your fingers in there, you're not scrabbling around in corners. It's tougher than the foam, so I don't feel bad about putting it on the desk, or maybe the side will knock off because I've not glued it properly, I definitely would with foam. Maybe your craft skills might be better than mine.
And the foam is 5mm.
Yeah,
you can 3D print a lot thinner than that and have it still very robust, I think.
And again, you can put lids on it much more easy. You can CAD in like a little lip around the inside, or you can put magnets much easier in it and stuff like that. The downside is the weight. So I 3D printed a friend's Twilight Imperium storage. It fits the expansion and that in there. Oh my god, it's a workout to get that around. I didn't have any concept of how heavy it was going to be, and even like Quacks, where I've made little pots for everything where you can put the book in the back and all that kind of stuff. And I've 3D printed the capsule holders for them all and all that.
Depends. Like, the thinner you go, obviously, the less. This is getting a bit techie now, but the thinner you go, the less space you have that is just infill, like 15% infill. It's going to be mostly 100% if you've got a very, very thin wall. Yeah. So I guess that's where your weight is going. If you had quite a big thing, it would be mostly empty.
Have you ever tried to add up the cost of this? Or is it just something you do as partly just interest, really? And
so a spool, like a kilogram spool of plastic, costs 20 quid? £25. Yeah. Let's not add the price of the 3D printer on top, but I think mine cost around the 250 quid mark, because the more you do, the cheaper that 3D printer works out.
Right?
You've got
to write that off as cost.
£20, £25 I can get, I would say, 2 average board games out of.
Right, so what about a Twilight Imperium, a full lot?
So, see, this is tough because I printed them all out in colours. So where you had the pink faction, they got a pink box. The blue faction got a blue box. So I bought 8 different colours at £20 a pack, because I was like, I'm going to get around to using those colours eventually again.
I bet they're still sat there, right?
The pink is the hot pink. So
I'll buy it off you, because I've just currently used up all of my 3D filament making crokinole holders.
Nice.
So I'm thoroughly out of 3D filament.
But if you go into, like, I've got lots of black and lots of like light grey, because I find them the colours that, and I've got some browns as well for making things look like wooden boxes and stuff like that. So I've got a lot of those. You can buy them fairly cheap, and you know that when one spool runs out, you just start the next one. And so I would say about £10 to £12 like
normal board game.
for a normal board game box that requires a few of them. What I will say about storage, whether it is foam or not, is the amount of wasted space you can get in a main box.
100%. Absolutely agree.
So my example is I bought the Carcassonne big box. I had the Carcassonne little box. I 3D printed my own design insert that took the big box and fitted it into the little box. Like, that's how much space I saved with good organisational skill.
And that's the beauty of doing your own inserts, I think, or buying someone else who's done the,
absolutely,
the effort.
Absolutely.
You really can make a massive difference with space. And if you're the kind of person that loves the organising and you get that kind of sense of satisfaction and almost like you've won another game because you have managed to you've worked
done the
puzzle
Tetris
out.
style puzzle.
And that was part of the fun for the Mansions of Madness thing for me, because you feel like, yes, I have achieved the pinnacle, spaces for this, and it's organised in a beautiful way. But I think we're definitely heading down a road here that a lot of people
You're revealing too much of your personality there.
A lot of people don't, feel the same as that. So fair enough. Curly's just sitting thinking, what is going on?
I appreciate the product of what you guys are talking about, but I have zero interest.
And I think that's it.
In how it gets there.
Is ultimately, we'll go back to like folded space or something like that. If you don't have the time or inclination to sort out and work out, do I need to make a 12mm box or a 14mm box?
And if you're the kind of person that doesn't care about that, or it wouldn't even cross your mind, don't go down the road of making
don't
inserts,
make it yourself, because you're going to have to at some point. But absolutely right. I think it's safe to say I think we've covered everything reasonable without going into real nerd layers on that. So without further ado, let's move on to our listener question. So turn 4. Moving on to turn 4, which is question time. So I'd like to thank Ian for sending this email in. He's asked, my wife and I have recently got into board gaming. We've started with Catan and Pandemic. We've also enjoyed playing the Princess Bride game and we'll be getting June to the table next week. We also enjoy card games such as Uno, Phase 10, etc. Do you have any suggestions for 2 to 4 games that we could enjoy as a couple? Now, if only we had a couple on hand that we could ask this question to.
Well, there we go.
Who knows?
Go on.
What do you think? What do you think?
Well, it would depend massively on whether you're going to play more 2-player or 4-player. But I would say if you want to cover most bases, there's a few that we've got that play well at 2 and well at up to 4.
Yeah.
And that's kind of our sweet spot, really, isn't it? So, for example, off the top of my head, I would say the first one that springs to mind would be Wingspan.
100%.
We've already talked about that today in our upgrades, but plays really well at 2. We played it at 2 quite a lot. Plays really well, but it plays equally well at 3 or 4, so that would be a really good one. But we've also got Everdell, not everyone's cup of tea, but we liked it at 2 and again at 3 or 4 as well.
I liked that even though I was a very novice board gamer at the time.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that I'm not novice now, but I could grasp that without even... Oh, and by the way, hi Ian. Nice to, hear from you after a long time. Wingspan is really good, and it doesn't hurt that it's really beautiful. And Everdell, exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few more as well that are more 2-player based that I had a little think about as well. Me and Becky at the moment, Ian, hello mate. We've been playing through Hogwarts Battle.
Yeah.
2-player.
It's really good.
I played it at it wasn't the Expo, it was the one at Alexandra Palace. And it was really, it was good, but I didn't overly get into it. But then we had a chat about it and we were looking for a game that played like that. We both really like Harry Potter and we were like, you know what, let's just do it. I ordered it and then we played the first scenario and we loved it, right?
Yeah, it's very, very simple. I mean, simple enough that a child could play.
I've played it with a friend and his son.
Yeah, which is really great. It's really inclusive, but that doesn't mean that it's too simple to enjoy as an adult kind of a game, I think.
Yeah, as you go through the years, right, and they get more complex. It's a kind of legacy game. You go through the years, you open a box and they add more mechanics into it as you go through. By the time you get to year 7, it might be quite complex-ish.
Yeah, but
it's built you up to it.
Yeah, but it's built you up
absolutely.
to it, and if need be, you could just stop at year 5 or year 4 and go, okay, we'll stop at this mechanic because this is how far that kid can cope with.
Yeah.
We'll just play that again and again. If they love Harry Potter, they're not going to care about the fact that they've not unlocked
Year
all the
6
other
and 7.
characters.
And
maybe.
the pieces are very nice. Just
Yeah.
putting out there, the dark marks are nice and shiny and little tokeny. Very good. Yeah.
I would caution 4 players.
Never tried it as a 4
Never
player.
tried it.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's a great 2-player game. I've played all the way through the base game and with the monster box, and it's fantastic. 3 players is nice. It's quite a good game at 3 players as well. 4, it's easy to lose by the time it gets back round to you,
Right.
and there's
okay.
a lot of time between turns as well. So it does kind of lose some of its appeal at 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, for a couples game, I think
Yeah.
bang on. It was one of my...
One of the biggest things I do on BGG, actually, Board Game Geek, is I look for the ideal pet player count. That is the most useful functionality on that website, in my opinion. You know, the reviews are all well and good, the ratings and stuff like that. But seeing what the ideal pet player count is, I'd be really shocked if that didn't say 2.
Might say 2 to 3, I think,
Yeah,
off the top
maybe.
of my head.
Yeah,
Another
maybe.
good one that's just occurred to me is Seven Wonders Duel.
Yeah,
Really good game. Seven Wonders is just another game, sort of card-based game. Really good, interesting artwork. Really like it. Seven Wonders Duel is the 2-player sort of version. It does change the mechanic. It does change it slightly, but it's really easy to play, and you can play a game in what, half an hour,
half
40
an hour.
minutes, something
Yeah.
like that. Really simple, and really easy to pick up. Small box, good.
Yeah,
Good
so
all-round game.
overall it kind of depends what kind of game you're after, really. For me, Hogwarts Battle wins it for a 2-player deck building, not too complex, quite casual game. I would say Wingspan wins it for me for a 4-player game that plays great at 2-player as well.
Yeah.
And again, complexity is not too high, but there's enough in there, enough little combos and tactics you can do that aren't too difficult to pick up, but it's difficult to get really good at. And then you've got your Seven Wonders Duel that is just a pure 2-player game.
Yeah.
Thematics wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea, I
No,
would say. with
no,
Seven
kind
Wonders
of,
Duel.
ancient civilization sort of a thing, but
Yeah.
really good. And then you've got your puzzle games. So I recently watched a really good video on YouTube, and I shout out the guy, and I can't think what it was called. The video was called something like Top 10 Games to Play Down the Pub, or something like that. And there's a few games mentioned in there which I think are amazing. So Cluster is one of them, which is the magnet game that we were playing quite a lot of recently. It works as a couple of 2-player and as a group. Just involves sticking magnets in a bit of string. But I 3D printed, because I couldn't find anywhere to buy, a game called Quarto, which is kind of like Connect 4 and kind of like Noughts and Crosses, sort of. So it involves using 16 pieces on the table. They're either black or white, tall or short, hollow or solid, and circular or square. And you basically got to build a 4 in a row, which shares one of those characteristics. Now the rub is you don't pick your own pieces, you pick the piece for your opponent.
No,
So it's
good.
yeah, so
Interesting.
it's like a level up from Noughts and Crosses, but that's really fun. And yeah, okay, I had to 3D print a copy but you could easily make it with modelling clay or something like that. I think you can buy it in wood. It would be beautiful like that, but I couldn't find it for sale anywhere.
Any suggestions from you, Adrian?
Yeah, so a couple of things. He submitted this question before we did our niche number ones. One of those niche number ones was great games to play at 2 that also play 5.
Yeah.
Give that a listen. 2 to 4 gives you a wealth of extra options, but it certainly has a few good suggestions in there. I had a couple of extra little suggestions though, which was Quadropolis. Quadropolis is a Age of Wonders city builder kind of game. You pick from a grid of buildings, and you're only allowed to pick certain squares in on this big block of different buildings that are available. And then if you picked it 2 places in, you have to put it on a number 2 spot, and they've all got several numbers on them. And then you have to lay out your pattern of city basically. And if parks are next to residential, you get bonus points. If ports are next to factories, you get extra points. But if factories are next to residential, I think it is, you lose points because you don't want your people living next to these smoke-producing factories.
Sounds like SimCity.
It is kind of like that. And what I would say is it's very simple. It's one of the simplest city builders I've played. And what I found is a lot of games, as they get towards 2 players, as they come down in count, they get a bit more sort of knife fighty. They get a bit more vicious. You end up a bit sort of it just ends up a little bit more sort of mean.
Aggressive sort
Yeah,
of
as you
play.
go down to 2 players. What I find with Quadropolis is because it is so light and because it doesn't restrict you throughout the game too much, it puts a very small amount of restriction in there. It makes a great 2-player game that also works almost exactly the same at 4 players.
That's interesting.
And so it's a competitive game, but it's not very competitive
Cutthroat.
at 2 players.
Yeah.
My other suggestion is the opposite to that, which again it gets much meaner as it gets to a smaller number, is Azel.
Oh, okay, Azel. Yeah.
However you want to pronounce it. And that gets a lot more tactical over, am I hate drafting, am I taking this factory
For theirs.
to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
it, and you can start counting turns in advance much more at 2 players than you can at 4, but the production's fantastic. That is a game that needs no upgrading as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful.
So if you haven't heard about it, it's like a Portuguese tile game.
Yeah, again, a theme is pasted on. But,
It is. You've got different colour squares, little pieces that you are putting on your wall, for want of a better word. You get more points if you get certain patterns in a row, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a puzzle pattern-y kind of game.
yeah, and you draft from a factory and you pick one colour and all the other colours go into the centre, and then essentially if you're towards the end, quite often you're forced to take ones that you can't place down, which become minus points.
Yeah.
And I find that becomes much more of a part of a 2-player game than it is a 4-player game. I've ended up on like minus 12 points because someone's really gone.
It's more
like,
punishing, isn't it?
is
Rather
much
than
more punishing.
do I need to work on my wall or shall I just work on ruining someone else's wall?
But I find it still great at 2 or 4
Yeah, it's
if you
good.
like that puzzle.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
I mean, you've made a great start with choosing Pandemic off this as one of your starting games, so well done there.
I knew you'd have to mention Pandemic. We've just bought that, so I'm looking forward to playing it
Yeah.
again without an alpha gamer telling us how to play the game.
That would be nice.
So no,
That'll be fun.
thank you very much, Ian, for the question. It's much appreciated. Great question. If you have a question you want to ask, we're going to go through the ways you can contact us at the end, but please do get in contact and ask away. We love seeing what questions you've got for us and coming up with our suggestions and answers. So thank you very much. And so we move on to turn 5, our penultimate turn. And in this turn, we talk about what we're excited about and what's coming up in the next few weeks before the next episode. So, Becky.
Well, I am going to talk about playing Just One with a group of friends who are not gamers. Got a kind of girly holiday with some work colleagues. So I have to take games with me, obviously. And I thought a really good one that's worked with another group of non-gamers was Just One, which is very, very, very simple kind of party game where you look at well, you don't look at it. The person who's guessing does not get to see the card. It's got 5 random words on it. You pick a number, then everyone has got to describe that word to you so that you can guess it. Now, the problem lies with if anyone's written anything the same as each other, the guesser does not get to see either of those words. So you've got to be quite sort of cryptic and maybe not very obvious, but you have to be obvious enough so they're going to guess the word.
Yeah, they get one guess at their one word, and they only see examples that turn up once, hence the Just One.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great choice we've played
It's
it as
great.
a group.
Yeah, it's
absolutely
great.
loved our game of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's great for non-gamers because they kind of just get that word association running.
It's so easy and obvious, but it makes you realise like, where was your mind going when you were thinking of that? And it's just really, really fun.
It is good
really, really fun. I have probably sold that game to 3 people now, and it all came from Adrian. So Adrian, you suggested that to me, and I loved it.
Thank you, TK Maxx, because they always do some nice cheap games at Christmas, and I was like, I'll pick that one up. But yeah, I think it's a great game for that. I've really enjoyed my Just Ones, and again, you play what you're supposed to play like 13 rounds, and then you
can play.
You consult that really mean chart on the back that tells you should do better each time.
How rubbish you are, rather than how
were.
awesome you are. Yeah, but you could just play until you get bored.
People just play until they keep going. I think it's great for that.
It's just good fun.
Nice.
Definitely.
Kelly.
So it's a little bit of a way off yet, but I want to talk about, because I've just put the event in, is Architects of the West Kingdom. I've got that one back in. I've only played it once. I've got Architects, Paladins, and Viscounts. I played Architects, about 4 years ago, and then learnt it, played it once, and then never played it since. And that's not because I didn't enjoy it. I loved it. It's just with the pandemic and everything else getting in the way, it's just kind of took a bit of a back burner. It's become the large part of my shelf of shame, those 3 games.
Yeah, sitting there shrink wrap, aren't they?
Yeah, 2 of them are. It's a bit.
I mean, certainly Architects. I've played once, but I've watched a couple rather randomly where I was like, I don't fancy playing a game, and on a game day I'll just sit and watch, sort of thing. And you can tell it plays better at 4 or 5. And as you say, during pandemic, we just didn't get those opportunities, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's a great choice. I do like Architects.
Is it card based? All I know of it is the artwork on the edge of the box, because that's all I've seen, and I quite like the look of that. So that's a start.
It's worker placement in its. There's some differences, and it's a bit of a. What I like about the game is it's worker placement, but it's a cutthroat worker placement. So you like go somewhere and you can like send them off to prison if you have more of them, and they have to buy them back from it, and and it's just an interesting mechanic. It's one of the, I wouldn't say it's heavy, but there's certainly some interesting mechanics in there that are different from your average worker placement.
I think that's it. It's worker placement with quite a significant twist.
Yes.
Worker placement, you've normally got 5 or 6 meeples. They come back to you each turn. Architects, you get 20. They stay out on the board, and people can round them up. If there's too many in an area, they can round them up and send them to prison. They get money for sending them to prison, and then you get money for getting them back. So it creates this kind of a
push-pull
mechanic of like, I want to send them to prison because I want money, but if I send them to prison too soon, they get more of their workers back quicker. I want to make them sweat with just a few workers left and stuff like that. I think it's going to be a great game.
So war of attrition, kind of a.
It's just it's difficult to describe, to be honest, but it is just really interesting twist, like you said, is a perfect word. A really interesting twist on a relatively common worker placement mechanic, I suppose. So I'm really looking forward to getting that to the table, and then as long as we enjoy that, hopefully following that up with Paladins, the sequel as well.
I think you'll have good fun with that game. Can't remember if I've signed up for it or not, but
I think you have.
Yes, this is where your Facebook group's very useful. You can just immediately tell.
I look forward to playing that game with you. I think the one I wanted to talk about, because again I'm in a similar situation to what Kerley's in, is there's a game that I've played once, loved it, and haven't really had the opportunity to play it again. That's Champions of Midgard. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing that, because it's worker placement. It's probably a slightly heavier weight than Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah.
From my memory of it, but it's got dice chucking, so it's got that random element. Now, my understanding is, because I haven't played all the expansions, is that the expansions mean that when you get a duff roll on the dice, your guys die and go to Valhalla, and then give you points for going to Valhalla. So there's a little bit of a plus side to not rolling well on your dice, which I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works, because I've heard good things about it. But yeah, it's a game I've enjoyed previously, so I've played it once a long time ago, and I'm just really looking forward to trying it out again and getting it to the table again. So
yeah, it's my one tabletop simulator game, actually, my first tabletop simulator game we did during the pandemic with JP. So yeah, it'd be good to get that one. I believe I'm playing that with you, mate. So
good. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely.
So our final turn is wrapping up, and victory points are about to be scored. We know Kerley's already won. Thanks to everyone for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe and review on your podcast player of choice. If you want to get in contact with the show on our socials, you can. You can email us, players@whoseturn.co.uk. You could check out our Facebook page, Whose Turn Is It Anyway Podcast. You could go to our Instagram page @WhoseTurnPodcast, or you can go to our TikTok @Whose Turn Is It Anyway. We'll be back again in 2 weeks with another episode. So until then, whose turn is it anyway?